something is stealing your life. Not your job, not your relationships, not the economy, the news, or the things that didn't go the way you planned. Something quieter, something that lives inside you, a current running beneath everything, pulling you under when you least expect it. Stress, overthinking, that low, heavy feeling that follows you into the morning before you've even opened your eyes. You've tried to outrun it, stayed busy, distracted yourself, maybe told yourself it would pass, but it comes back. It always comes back, because you've been treating the symptoms while the root goes untouched. Here's the truth nobody tells you. Your stress isn't coming from your life. It's coming from your interpretation of your life. The stories your mind builds around what happens to you, the mental loops that replay, predict, catastrophize, and judge on a cycle that never seems to stop. That's where Stoic philosophy enters. Not as a motivational concept, not as an ancient relic you admire from a distance, as a mental operating system, one that has been tested in war, slavery, exile, and loss, and has held. In this video, you'll work through 8 Stoic lessons, each one designed to dismantle a specific pattern of stress and replace it with something that actually lasts. This isn't about feeling better for a day. This is about thinking differently, forever. Before we go any further, if you're done letting stress run your life, type "free" below. It's a small act, but small acts are exactly how this starts. Let's begin. Lesson 1: The Dichotomy of Control. If there is one idea at the absolute foundation of Stoic philosophy, one principle that, if you truly absorbed it, would eliminate the majority of your suffering overnight, it is this: some things are in your control and some things are not. That's it. That's the whole lesson, except it isn't simple to apply because your mind has likely spent years ignoring this distinction entirely. Epictetus, who was born into slavery and lived the first part of his life with zero freedom over his external circumstances, built his entire philosophy around this single idea. He called it the dichotomy of control. And he was ruthless about it. What is in your control? Your thoughts, your choices, your effort, your response. Everything else is outside your jurisdiction. Think about what you spent mental energy on this week. Traffic, other people's opinions, whether something would work out the way you hoped, what someone meant by what they said, the weather, the economy, the future. None of it was in your control, and yet your nervous system burned through energy as if worrying could change the outcome. This is the first and most devastating source of stress, the habit of pouring your attention, your emotion, and your mental resources into things that were never yours to control in the first place. The Stoics didn't say this to make you passive, they said it to make you precise. Because when you stop bleeding energy on the uncontrollable, something remarkable happens. You suddenly have enormous reserves left for what is in your control. Your discipline, your perspective, your next action. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, one of the most powerful men who ever lived, wrote in Meditations that the only thing any person truly owns is their ruling faculty, their mind, their capacity to choose how they respond. Everything else, including his empire, his legacy, and his reputation, he held loosely, as things that could be taken. If the most powerful man in the known world practiced this level of detachment, what does that tell you about how you are holding the things in your life? Here's an exercise to begin rewiring this today. When you feel stress rising, ask yourself one question. Is this inside or outside my control? not as a rhetorical dismissal, but as a genuine audit. If it's outside your control, your job isn't to fix it. Your job is to release it and redirect your focus to what you can affect. This sounds deceptively simple, but practice it for 1 week, genuinely, and watch what happens to the volume of your anxiety. It doesn't vanish, but it shrinks, because you stop feeding it with attention it was never owed. The dichotomy of control is not a passive philosophy. It is a radical act of precision. It says, I will not waste the one life I have on things I cannot change. And that decision, made consistently, is the beginning of real freedom. Lesson 2. Your thoughts are not reality. Your mind is a storyteller, and like all storytellers, it edits, dramatizes, and sometimes fabricates entirely. The problem isn't that your mind tells stories. That's what minds do. The problem is that somewhere along the way you stopped being the audience and became the believer. You started treating every thought as a dispatch from reality rather than what it actually is. A construction, a mental event, something that appeared and, if left alone, would disappear. Epictetus put it plainly in the Enchiridion. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the opinions about things. Read that again. Not by things. By opinions about things. By the interpretations, the projections, the meaning the mind assigns to what happens. Consider what actually occurs when you feel stressed. Something happens in the world. A difficult email, an unexpected bill, a relationship tension. Then, in a fraction of a second, your mind interprets that event. It assigns meaning. It predicts consequences. It tells you what this means about you, about others, about the future. And the emotional response you experience isn't a reaction to the event. It's a reaction to the story. This is where the suffering lives, not in the event itself, but in the narrative layer your mind wraps around it. Cognitive science has caught up with what the Stoics understood 2,000 years ago. The brain doesn't experience reality directly. It builds a model of reality, informed by memory, bias, fear, and expectation. What you perceive as objective experience is, in fact, a heavily filtered interpretation. You have never experienced an event without interpretation. Neither has anyone else. So, what do you do with this? You develop the practice of examining your thoughts before obeying them. When a thought appears, this is hopeless, I'm going to fail, nobody understands me. You don't automatically accept it as truth. You hold it at a distance and ask, is this a fact or is this a story? Not to dismiss the feeling, but to separate the reality from the interpretation so you can respond to the actual situation rather than the dramatized version. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily. In his private writings, he would catch his own thinking and question it, pulling apart the assumption from the evidence, the fear from the fact. This wasn't an intellectual exercise for him. It was survival, because even an emperor, surrounded by war and political betrayal, understood that the mind unchecked would devour itself. Your thoughts are real experiences. They feel vivid and urgent and completely true. But they are not reality. They are your mind's response to reality, and that response is something you can learn to shape. When you begin to create that small space between what happens and what your mind concludes, you take back authorship of your emotional life. And that space, that pause, is where Stoic philosophy lives. It is where you live once you decide to. Lesson 3. Stop living in the future. Anxiety has a home address, and it isn't here. It lives in the future, a version of the future that doesn't exist yet, that may never exist, and that your mind nonetheless treats as imminent, inevitable, and catastrophic. The Stoics recognized this clearly. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And if you look honestly at your own history of anxiety, you'll likely find that this is true. Most of what you feared didn't happen, and the things that did happen, you handled them, maybe imperfectly, but you're still here. The problem with future-oriented thinking isn't that it's wrong to plan or prepare. Preparation is wisdom. The problem arises when the mind abandons the present entirely and relocates into a future catastrophe it is powerless to control. That mental relocation is what anxiety actually is, not a reasonable response to a real threat, but a prolonged residency in a place that doesn't exist. Stoicism offers a powerful corrective, amor fati, love of fate, and the practice of radical presence, not the kind of presence that's sold as a weekend retreat. The kind of presence that says, what is actually happening right now, in this moment, that requires my attention? Because when you ask that question honestly, the answer is almost always quieter than your mind has been suggesting. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." 3 words that consistently applied dismantle the architecture of anxiety. Not because the future doesn't matter, but because the future is built in the present. Every action, every decision, every moment of discipline or rest, it happens now. The future self you're so afraid for is created by this moment's choices. Worrying about it doesn't build it. Working in it does. Here is a practice that rewires this pattern. When you feel anxiety about something upcoming, ask, what is the next right action I can take right now about this? Not a complete solution, not a guarantee, just the next right step. If there is one, take it. If there isn't one, if the outcome is genuinely beyond your current reach, then you have your answer. Nothing to do here. Return to the present. This isn't denial. It isn't naivety. It is the deliberate act of refusing to spend present energy on future problems that are either solvable by present action or unsolvable entirely. Either way, anxiety is not the tool for the job. Seneca also wrote, "He suffers more than necessary who suffers before it is necessary." Think about how much of your suffering has been preemptive, pain borrowed from a future that never came due. The present moment is the only place where life is actually happening. Stoicism doesn't ask you to ignore the future. It asks you to stop living there, because the life you're so afraid of losing is passing by while you worry about losing it. Come back. It's here. Lesson 4. Emotion is information, not identity. You are not your emotions. This might be the most important sentence in this entire video, and also the one your mind will resist the most. Because it doesn't feel that way. When anxiety rises, it doesn't feel like a visitor, it feels like a verdict. When sadness moves in, it doesn't feel like a weather pattern passing through, it feels like a permanent climate. When anger arrives, it speaks in the first person. I am furious, I am hurt, I am done. The emotion doesn't announce itself as a temporary experience. It announces itself as you. And that is precisely the confusion that keeps people trapped. The Stoics made a crucial distinction between what they called passions, strong, unchosen emotional reactions, and good emotions, stable, rational responses to experience. They weren't saying emotions are bad or that you should suppress them. They were saying, don't let a temporary emotional state become your operating identity. Think about what happens when you fuse with an emotion. When you stop saying, I feel anxious, and start saying, I am an anxious person. When you stop saying "I feel sad today" and start treating sadness as a personality trait, a life sentence, or a prophecy, the emotion, which was designed by your nervous system as a piece of information, becomes a box you live inside. Emotions are messengers. Anxiety says, something feels uncertain or threatening. Sadness says, something meaningful has been lost or is missing. Anger says, a boundary has been crossed or a value has been violated. These are useful signals. They point toward things that matter, but they are not conclusions. They are not verdicts about who you are, what your life means, or what the future holds. Epictetus taught his students to observe their inner world with a kind of disciplined curiosity, to notice what arises without immediately obeying it, to ask what a feeling is pointing toward rather than becoming the feeling itself. This is the Stoic version of emotional intelligence, not suppression. Observation. Here's a shift that changes everything. Instead of "I am anxious," try "I notice anxiety arising." Instead of "I am depressed," try "I am experiencing a heavy emotional state right now." The language isn't just semantic. It creates a gap between you and the emotion. And in that gap, you retain your ability to choose. You remain the observer. The emotion becomes something that moves through you rather than something that defines you. This matters especially in depression, where the emotional state can feel so total, so encompassing, that the person inside the depression begins to believe, "This is who I am." The Stoic answer to that is firm and compassionate. No, this is what you are experiencing, and experiences pass. You are not your worst feeling. You are not even your best feeling. You are the awareness underneath all of it, the observer that remains when the emotion has moved on. That's who you're building when you practice Stoicism, and that person is far more stable than any emotion passing through. Lesson 5. The obstacle is the way. There's a quiet assumption most people carry, usually unconsciously, that goes something like this. Once things stop being difficult, I'll be okay. Once the problem is resolved. Once the relationship stabilizes. Once the financial pressure lifts. Once life cooperates. Then everything will be fine. The Stoics would call this a fundamental misunderstanding of how strength is built. Marcus Aurelius wrote, in notes to himself, remember, not in a published manifesto, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." These weren't poetic words written for posterity. They were practical instructions written by a man who governed an empire during a devastating plague, survived military betrayals, outlived several of his children, and faced one of the most prolonged crises in Roman history. He wasn't writing about obstacles in theory. He was writing from inside them. The principle is this: difficulty is not the enemy of your progress. In most cases, it is the material your progress is made from. Think about any version of yourself you genuinely respect. The moments of growth that shaped your character, your resilience, your understanding of what you're capable of, were any of them comfortable? Were any of them handed to you without friction? Almost certainly not. The difficult moments did something to you that the easy ones couldn't. They revealed what was already inside you. They built capacity where there was none. This isn't motivational gloss. This is observable reality. Bone density increases under pressure. Muscles develop through resistance. Psychological resilience, the kind that doesn't crumble when circumstances are hard, is forged in exactly the conditions you're trying to escape. The Stoic reframe isn't pretend the obstacle doesn't hurt. It's ask what this obstacle is making possible. Because almost every significant difficulty contains something, a lesson, a redirection, an unexpected strength, a forced clarity that wouldn't have arrived any other way. When Epictetus was a slave, he didn't have the freedom to change his external situation. What he had was the absolute freedom to decide what that situation meant. He chose to treat it as a school. He came out of it as one of the most influential philosophers in human history, not despite his constraints, in many ways because of them. You don't have to be grateful for hard things. That's not what this lesson is asking. What it's asking is for you to stop treating difficulty as proof that something has gone wrong, because sometimes it's proof that something is being built inside you that couldn't have been built any other way. The next time you face an obstacle, before you ask, "How do I remove this?" try asking, "What is this teaching me, and how is engaging with it making me stronger?" The obstacle doesn't disappear, but it changes function. It stops being a wall and starts being a path. That shift in perception is not small. For many people, it is everything. Lesson 6. Detach from outcomes. Here is a pattern that drives an enormous amount of human suffering. Putting your emotional well-being inside an outcome you cannot guarantee. You decide that you will feel okay when you get the job, when the relationship works, when the project succeeds, when the number on the scale changes, when people finally understand you, and so every day until that outcome arrives, or doesn't, you live in a state of suspended anxiety, tethered to something that hasn't happened yet and may not happen the way you need it to. The Stoics called this an error of judgment, not an emotional weakness, a philosophical error. Because you have taken your peace, which is an internal condition you can influence, and placed it inside an external result you cannot control. And then you wonder why you feel powerless. Epictetus was direct about this. Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens, not as resignation, as precision. You bring full effort, full intention, full commitment to whatever you're doing. And then you hold the outcome loosely because it was never entirely yours to determine. This is one of the most misunderstood Stoic ideas. People hear detach from outcomes and think it means stop caring, stop trying, stop wanting things. It doesn't. Detachment in the Stoic sense doesn't mean indifference. It means refusing to make your inner state conditional on an external result. Think about what changes when you apply this. You work on the presentation not because you're guaranteed approval, but because good work is worth doing for its own sake. You invest in the relationship not because you're guaranteed permanence, but because love and connection are worth practicing regardless of how they end. You build the business not because success is promised, but because the act of building with discipline and integrity is its own reward. This is what the Stoics called preferred indifference. Things that are genuinely better to have than not have, which you pursue with full effort, but which you do not require for your peace of mind. Your peace doesn't live inside them. It lives in how you show up, regardless of what they deliver. Seneca put it powerfully, "He who has everything wants for nothing." And the Stoics understood that the person who has genuine inner peace, who has made their well-being independent of circumstances, is richer than any person who owns the world but needs it to behave a certain way. Here's the practical shift. Instead of, "I'll be okay when this works out," try, "I'll be okay because of how I'm choosing to engage with this, regardless of how it resolves." You are still pursuing the goal. You are still giving everything, but you are no longer betting your emotional stability on a result that isn't entirely in your hands. That is not passivity. That is freedom. and it is available to you the moment you decide that your peace belongs to you, not to outcomes. Lesson 7. Build an identity that cannot be shaken. Most people build their identity on things that can be taken away. Status, achievement, other people's opinions, physical appearance, a role, parent, partner, professional, provider. These aren't worthless things. They matter. But when they become the foundation of who you believe you are, you have built your entire self on ground that shifts without warning. And then when something shifts, when the job ends, the relationship breaks, the health fails, the recognition disappears, it doesn't just feel like a loss. It feels like annihilation, because the thing that was lost wasn't just a thing, it was you. The Stoics understood this deeply. They spoke often about the importance of building your identity not on externals, the things fortune can give and take, but on your character. The qualities you cultivate deliberately, your integrity, your discipline, your commitment to acting well, regardless of what the world returns to you. These are things that no circumstance can revoke without your permission. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Not be seen as one, not be praised as one. Be one." The doing is the identity, not the recognition of the doing. This distinction matters profoundly for stress and depression. When your identity is grounded in character, in the consistent practice of your values, you have something that external events cannot destabilize. You can lose the job and still know who you are. You can lose the relationship and still have yourself. You can fail publicly and still have the private knowledge that you acted with integrity. That is not arrogance. That is the deepest form of self-possession. Think about where you've been anchoring your identity. If someone asked you, "Who are you?" would your answer be mostly composed of roles and achievements? "I'm a manager. I'm successful. I'm a good partner. I've built this." What happens to your sense of self when any of those falters? Epictetus taught something radical. Your true self is not your reputation, your body, your wealth, or your social standing. Your true self is your prohairesis, your capacity to choose, to reason, to respond with intention. It is the one thing that cannot be enslaved, even when your body can. He knew this not as a philosophical proposition, but as a lived truth. The practice of building unshakable identity begins with asking, what values do I want to practice today regardless of how today goes? Not what do you want to achieve, but how do you want to be? Then you be that thing, consistently, privately, without needing the world to notice. Over time, that consistent practice becomes who you are, not as a brand, not as a performance, but as a lived reality. And when life tests you, as it inevitably will, you discover that the ground beneath you is more solid than you imagined. Because it was built from the inside out. And nothing built from the inside out can be taken from the outside in. Lesson 8. Practice, not perfection. You will not apply all of this perfectly, and that's not a disclaimer, that's the point. Stoicism was never designed as a philosophy to achieve. It was designed as a practice, a daily engagement with your thinking, your responses, and your choices that improves not because you become perfect, but because you become more intentional over time. The Stoics themselves, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, all wrote about their own failures, their own moments of frustration, impatience, fear, and doubt. They weren't writing from a place of having arrived. They were writing from the process of trying. Marcus Aurelius didn't write Meditations as a finished man. He wrote it as a man who woke up every morning and tried again. I've failed to be patient. I'll try again. I've let fear take over. I notice it. I redirect. That was his philosophy in daily life, not a destination, but a practice of return. This matters enormously for how you approach the lessons in this video, because one of the most common patterns that creates and maintains stress is the belief that you should be further along, that by now you should have this under control, that your continued struggle is evidence of some fundamental deficiency in you. It isn't. It's evidence that you're human, and it's also evidence that the practice is working, because you can only notice you've slipped if you have a standard to notice it against. Epictetus made a distinction between a philosopher and a person who reads about philosophy. The philosopher isn't someone who knows Stoic theory. The philosopher is someone who applies it imperfectly, repeatedly, with patience and without self-punishment, until the principles become reflexive, until the space between stimulus and response widens naturally, not because you forced it, but because you've practiced it enough times that it becomes part of how you think. This is the truth about every meaningful mental shift. It doesn't happen in a single moment of insight. It happens in the accumulation of small, consistent moments where you catch the automatic pattern and choose differently. 100 small redirections over weeks and months, and one day you realize the loop doesn't grip you the way it once did. That's not inspiration. That's neuroplasticity. That's how minds actually change. So here is the final instruction, and it is simple. Start. Not from perfection, not from a place of having it all figured out. Start from exactly where you are, with whatever you understood from this video, and apply one thing today. Just one. Maybe it's the question, is this in my control? Maybe it's the pause before reacting to a thought. Is this a fact or a story? Maybe it's the small act of bringing yourself back to the present when anxiety pulls you into the future. One practice, one moment, one return. And then tomorrow, another. And the day after, another still. That is how a Stoic is made, not in a single decision. In 1,000 small ones, made with intention over a life. One decision changes everything. You've just walked through 8 lessons, not as abstract philosophy, but as tools, each one targeted at a specific source of stress and emotional pain, and each one grounded in a tradition that has survived because it works. Let's bring them together. The dichotomy of control asks you to stop bleeding energy on what was never yours to manage. Your thoughts are not reality asks you to separate the story from the event. Stop living in the future asks you to come back to the only place where anything real is actually happening. Emotion is information reminds you that feelings pass through you but do not define you. The obstacle is the way reframes every difficulty as the material your strength is built from. Detach from outcomes, freeze your peace from the tyranny of results you can't fully control. Build an identity that cannot be shaken, anchors you in something permanent, character, rather than something fragile. And practice, not perfection, releases you from the impossible standard of having to get it all right. 8 lessons, 1 operating system. It doesn't ask you to pretend life isn't hard. It doesn't ask you to suppress what you feel or perform a kind of forced positivity that rings hollow at midnight when the real weight of life settles in. What it asks is simpler and harder at the same time. To think differently, to respond instead of react, to choose with intention who you are going to be, even when the circumstances don't cooperate. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." Decide first, then act. That decision, the one to begin thinking like a Stoic, doesn't require a perfect moment. It doesn't require you to have everything figured out. It requires one moment of intention, right now, followed by another tomorrow. You already made the first move by being here. Now, make the second. If you're ready to stop being controlled by stress and start being guided by wisdom, say so below. I am in control. Because words have weight, and the ones you speak about yourself matter more than you know. Subscribe to the Stoic Mode and hit the bell. There's more clarity waiting for you here, and you've already proven you're someone who shows up for it. Thank you for watching. Stay steady, stay strong,